Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Over the next half an hour, we'll be looking beyond the business headlines by giving you in-depth perspective on the stories that are affecting all of us. Coming up on today's show, with employability prospects uncertain, the prospect of owning a home out of reach, and issues with mental health on the rise, young people in Britain are facing a bleak future. The Winch Community Centre in London opened their doors to Channel's Business Global earlier this week, where I spoke to some young people about how they're overcoming such challenging circumstances. And education ministers representing over 80 partner countries of the Global Partnership for Education have convened in Paris this week for a summit that seeks to address what organisers describe as an unprecedented teaching crisis. Charles North, the acting CEO of the fund, will join me from Paris to discuss the outcome of the gathering. Then later, I'll be looking back at some of the biggest business news stories of the week. But first, let's start the show with a topic that's dominated headlines here in the UK. The Prime Minister has announced that the British government will spend 2.5% of GDP on defence by 2030, as NATO Secretary General warned that the alliance must stand up to Vladimir Putin. Speaking from the NATO conference in Madrid, Boris Johnson told broadcasters that we need to invest for the long term in vital capabilities like future combat air, while simultaneously adapting to a more dangerous and more competitive world. The sum equates to a further £55 billion. Well, earlier I spoke with our business correspondent Simon Pusey for some analysis. Simon, we haven't seen the Prime Minister at all since the Conservative Party lost those two recent by-elections. He was in Africa and then he's been at the G7 and NATO gatherings. How has his presence felt?
Yeah, so I think that's actually really helped him, and I think what he's done well has been when he's been firefighting so many things at home, actually abroad. He seems almost statesman-like and seems to be obviously at the forefront of helping Ukraine in terms of support. So recently unveiled an additional £1 billion for Ukraine. That takes the total to £3.8 billion that the UK has provided. It was the first country to provide aid in terms of money and weapons to Ukraine, ahead of all of the other European and even American countries. And Boris Johnson says that this is transforming Ukraine's defences. And President Zelensky has come back and said, thank you very much, Boris Johnson. And obviously he was fulsome in his support for Boris Johnson when he had that vote against him. So I think he's looking quite good abroad. So I think that's really helped him. Having said that, that's not much at all money in terms of what Ukraine actually needs. And the US has sent $40 billion to Ukraine. And Estonia has spent a larger proportion of their income. So it's all in context, really. But I think that it is very good for Ukraine, and I think they do really appreciate that. And it's the gesture as well as the money that this support is continuing. Ukraine still says it's not enough, and it's asking that they're saying they only receive a tenth of the weapons that they've asked for. So there's still a lot more to do. But I think Boris has come out of that looking quite good. He also had an exchange at the G7 with the Argentinian president Alberto Fernandez, talking about the Falklands. That seems to be something that's been bubbling on, and basically saying, please, can you stop talking about the Falklands? This is kind of over and done with. But he just looks quite good, I think, abroad compared to at home, when you've got all of these scandals and you've obviously got the continuation of Partygate and things, and that will obviously continue as more photos and seems to come out. And then you had those by-election losses where you had a couple of resignations from the Conservative benches. But it generally seems to be that when he's abroad, he's doing quite well in terms of ratings and polling, and when he's at home, he's under fire for various things that crop up with the cost of living crisis and various other sort of things in sending migrants abroad to Africa, things like that. So I think he's looking quite good at the moment. He's actually quite solid in comparison to recent weeks. Usually we're saying, when's he going to resign? How is he still in office? But at the moment, when he goes abroad, he goes to the G7 and he seems to look quite good.
Gosh, we'll see if he's looking good next week. Thank you, Simon. Thank you. Now to our next story. Education ministers representing over 80 partner countries for the Global Partnership for Education have convened in Paris this week for a summit that seeks to address what organisers describe as an unprecedented teaching crisis that has the potential to threaten the future of children around the world. Education is at risk because of conflict, COVID-19 and economic pressures, and it's estimated that 24 million learners may never see the inside of a classroom again. Charles North, the acting CEO of GPE, joins me now from Paris for more on this. Charles North, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on Channel's Business Global once again. The summit has concluded, and I believe the aim at the start was to get GPE's partner countries focused on providing this meaningful change to children across the world. Are you confident that you achieved your objective?
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. I believe we have achieved our objective. We sought out to ensure that our partner countries, had a voice here in this summit, and so we brought in, supported some of them to come travel to Paris for this meeting, which was very helpful to have them here. But we actually helped them come together in a meeting. They were talking to each other, sharing their stories of what was working and what is not working. And it was great to see that happen. They were pleased to be able to connect with each other in person these days. That seems to be a rarity. But they also came out with a communique. They said, we want to say to the world that we are committed to transformation of education. It is not sufficient to do incremental change, but we need to see a wholesale change that will ensure that every child gets a quality education. They committed themselves to increasing financing from their side, and they called on the international community to also increase funding, particularly during this very difficult time in the post-pandemic world.
Absolutely. I know anybody who's media savvy will have witnessed the way the world has changed. All the focus at the moment is on the war in Europe and the global market. Seem to have turned our back on COVID-19 if you're not in China. Do you think that has deepened the education crisis?
I think it has, but let me just note that back in 2 years ago, GPE came in with emergency funding for all these countries to help them pursue their ideas, their creative ideas on how to address the COVID pandemic. And they went at it with high tech, internet and radio, TV. They used newspapers and even sent out Braille materials for those who needed it. And they reached out to children who were vulnerable to make sure that they would come back to school. They went into the schools and made sure the schools were ready for children to come back. They did all of that. These people are heroes. The work they've been doing, but nonetheless, the situation has gotten significantly worse. Before the pandemic, we were looking at 250 million children out of school. After the pandemic, we're looking at another 24 million children who will never see the inside of a school. And most of those are girls. So this is quite serious. We're also seeing that those who have come back to school, that their learning is not progressed. They've been out of school for 2 years and haven't really learned. Before the pandemic, there's a measure called learning poverty, which is a 10-year-old's ability to comprehend a simple written story. And so we saw before the pandemic that 57% of children were unable to comprehend a simple story. Now it's up to 70%. Wow. 70% of children unable to comprehend a simple story. And what's now we see, if we look to the lifetime of these children, the lost income that they will face is severe. Around the world, the pandemic will lead to income losses of $21 trillion. And that's up from $17 trillion that was estimated a year ago. So yes, is there a problem? Absolutely. The problem is severe and it needs urgent attention.
Absolutely. Some pretty stark figures that you've just outlined there, Charles. So it's fantastic that Global Partnership for Education are using these funds accurately. I've got to say, because of course our viewers are in Nigeria. It's a huge country, over 200 million population. And I think there are some concerns, Charles, that, you'll speak to these ministers, they nod their heads in agreement. As soon as they get back home, these funds disappear. How are you able to ensure that, there is transparency and making sure that, GP are on the ground and it is going to the people that need it most, these children you've just mentioned?
This is very much a part of what we do from the get-go. It's about bringing the whole community together. It's led by the government, but with civil society and teachers and private sector and private foundations and the donors and the multilateral organizations coming together to identify what the critical challenge is that needs to be addressed, and then ensuring that that program is managed properly throughout. They are monitoring this group of partners, watching what is happening and ensuring that it's going to the children who need it most. We're talking about girls, we're talking about children with disabilities, refugees, and children living in remote areas. We must reach them if we want to transform education systems.
Absolutely. Charles, before I let you go, what are your hopes ahead of the UN's Transforming Education Summit in September?
Well, I think the main thing we need to see is a commitment from the world to address the problems of education, to really transform. But this is going to require funding from the world or organizations, from countries to make this happen. So we need to see that kind of commitment. But we also need to see a commitment to transforming education. Again, it's not about incremental change. This is not about business as usual. It has to be a big change. And there are now discussions about how do we build a social movement to get really people to understand outraged by the statistics that I've just shown you. So, I really have high hopes for that summit, that we can drive attention and make sure that everybody understands how critical education is, and that we have a way forward through transformation to make it better.
Well, I think all of our viewers will agree that GPE is doing a fantastic job, and we do hope that those funds are distributed to the people that need it most. Charles North, Acting CEO of the Global Partnership for Education. Thank you for joining me today from Paris, Charles.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. Let's change gears now to focus on Nigeria's booming fintech sector. The Central Bank of Nigeria has granted an approval in principle to Pocket App, a product of Piggy Tech Global Limited, as a mobile money operator in Nigeria. The platform has become the country's first social commerce to secure the CBN's AIP for an MMO license, marking a crucial development in the company's bid to support seamless payments and online commerce throughout the country. For more on this, I'm now being joined by Joshua Chibuze, the co-founder and CMO of PiggyVest, the parent firm of Pocket App. Joshua joins me from Lagos. Joshua Chibuze, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join me on Channel's Business Global today. I've got to confess, I haven't actually heard of social commerce before, and I don't think I'm the only one. Could you just educate our viewers exactly what social commerce is?
So when you think about buying something from someone you know, that's pretty much it, right? So that's pretty much very common with what we do on Instagram, WhatsApp, today. That's pretty much, so it's basically digitizing that process and making it very seamless and removing the barrier that is trust. So the major problem we're trying to solve with commerce, and targeting social commerce, is the problem of trust. So you find out that it's very hard for you to patronize a vendor online who you don't even know, right? Again, so I'll talk more about what we're doing as regards that, but
okay, thank you very much. So it's something that we certainly do all the time, and I've got to say, Nigerian fintech connoisseurs are doing incredibly well, and Pocket App, formerly a Beg app, has made a landmark. You finally got some resolution with the central bank in Nigeria, although you said it's just in principle. Can you tell me a little bit about that process and why the development is so crucial to expand financial inclusion in the country?
So again, to do the kind of business that we do, you need a mobile money license, and we felt that was important. And that's why even, about, a year ago, we applied for it, and, it just came through. But yeah, it allows us to do a whole lot more. Currently, we're operating using partnerships. We don't handle our own banking services at the moment. We use other people, but what the MMO license will grant us, especially when it's commercial, is be able to do our own banking services ourselves and many other things. But yes, it's a very good step.
Joshua Chibuze, co-founder and CMO of PiggyVest, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Shortly, I'll be bringing you my report from the Winch Community Centre in the capital, where earlier in the week I spoke to some young people about some of the challenges they're facing in an uncertain economy. But until then, here's a rundown of the week's biggest business stories. Thousands of staff at the accounting giant PwC will enjoy bumper pay rises of at least 9% this week as bosses seek to ease the cost of living crisis and retain workers in a highly competitive jobs market. The award is thought to be the biggest for the firm in a decade and will cost £120 million. The PwC bonus pool is also rising by £10 million to £138 million. With inflation running at 9.1% in the UK, senior staff across competitive sectors are demanding bigger pay deals. Credit Suisse has been found guilty of failing to prevent money laundering by a Bulgarian cocaine trafficking gang. The ruling is Switzerland's first criminal trial of one of its biggest banks. The court heard evidence about the bank's role in accepting millions of euros in bank deposits between 2004 and 2008, which should have been a red flag. It was fined £1.7 million in order to pay $15 million to the Swiss government. Credit Suisse denies any wrongdoing and said it would appeal against the ruling. AC Milan and Puma have announced the long-term extension of their sponsorship contract, first signed in 2018. The German sports goods firm is said to have more than doubled the value of its deal to kit out the Italian soccer champions. No financial details were given in the statement, but a source familiar with the matter said that Puma will pay roughly €30 million per year under a new 5-year contract. Now to our final topic. Britain's economy has delivered a bumpy ride for young people in recent years. Employability prospects remain uncertain. It is seen by some as virtually impossible to get on the incredibly expensive housing ladder, and leading medical experts are seeing a significant rise in mental health cases linked to trauma experienced during the COVID-19 lockdowns. Earlier in the week, Channel's Business Global was invited to the Winch, a charity working with local young people in London for almost 50 years. So much has happened over the past couple of years. You've got a war on Britain's back doorstep in Ukraine. We're trying to come out of the pandemic, and we have the cost of living crisis. These are the things that are flooding, the news wires every single day, every hour of the day. Is that something that's impacting you? Is that something that's impacting some of the young people you're working with, or does it kind of go over your head?
I mean, no, definitely so, especially growing up in this area. I mean, for a long time, you kind of felt as if something like this was to come in the near future. And as a little kid, I never thought of it, I thought nothing about it. But as a young person, I was ultimately contributing towards my family as well. You kind of feel like everything has a cost, and it takes a toll on everyone. Especially, I mean, the cost of living has gone through the roof, and we can talk about if it's the water bill, if it's the electric bill, and through to smart meters and everything. It's something that's, affecting us all, and we all have to think about the way we spend and what we do with our money a bit more wisely, and especially with young people as well, growing up and thinking that, some of them looking at their clothes that used to cost maybe £60, it might cost £75 now, and maybe some of their parents might not be able to afford it anymore. And just people providing food, putting food on the table, and having to work a lot longer as well. I think that's an issue that is quite worrying at this moment of time as well. Aside
from the headlines, obviously you are a young person. What are young people talking about? What are they worried about? Are they worried about knife crime? Are they worried about how many jobs they're going to have to do to buy those Air Forces, or, help contribute to the bills, as so many young people are obviously doing?
Well, now as money, as inflation's rising, interest rates rising, everything, money has become more of a problem, and more of also of a goal towards young people, as many young people are influenced by people, celebrities, rappers, and all those things. They seem as they have to do it, rather than they don't have to do it, but they're given a way which they need to do it. But how I view it is that young people currently are worrying about smaller things in comparison to older people, because they haven't really experienced it. But one essential thing they're worrying about is knife crime. Around the area, of course, it used to be much worse, but it's been helped, and it's been gentrified and everything. But they still need to worry, and it's such a poor thing, because children shouldn't have to worry every day whether they may be robbed or maybe get stabbed or something like that may happen to them. It shouldn't be a thing a kid has to worry about.
I most definitely think young people have it harder right now, and I think there's older generation that sort of take it for granted how they had it in their time, and the expectancies of young people right now is crazy. The house prices are ridiculous, so for young people living at home still, or young people who adultification right now is a massive thing with our generation, where young people are being expected to work from the age of 15 or to be helping at home from the age of 40, maybe younger, and look after their younger siblings or even look after their own parents. Stuff that wouldn't happen in the older generation. The whole sort of structure and the whole sort of stereotype of how a similar family setup would be has completely gone out the window. I think for us as a youth service, we're here to provide young people with a hope, to provide them a platform where we're aware if they're going through hard times. We're here to soften the blow. We're here to help them recover from the position they're in, the circumstances they're going through. So we're not here to hide away from it. We're not here to say give any false hope. We're here to give the real hope that we understand what you're going through and we're here for you.
From what I've seen, some of the issues that can be affecting youth here would be mental health, majorly, because I think the way the society is built is kind of, it's easier for someone to kind of be isolated, for you to feel alone. There's a lot of individualism here that just allows you to stay on your own. If you don't have a gang, if you don't have a clique of, group of people that you roll with, it's easier for you to feel alone. And then that kind of having a community that you relate with, that you belong to, helps you to overcome mental health issues. But when you don't have that in this kind of community, young people are at the risk of, being isolated, being ostracized, or having mental health issues, and becoming suicidal. And also there are other societal issues like poverty, because in society now there is a lot of gentrification. People cannot afford certain things. People who grew up in a certain environment, in a certain community, they are being displaced, and they have to move out of such area to a different area. And this can affect the way young people think. This can affect them mentally, and I think it's a big issue. It's a big issue, yeah.
I think that the winch was definitely a place where it started my journey through as going into a young person, because through my brother I was introduced to this youth club here, and meeting people through this youth club, I met so many friends here. I've made so many friends here. I mean, people that I may not see anymore, but it just provided a different aspect to life, and maybe it definitely improved my quality of life through many activities that I've done here, as we just said before. But also, it kind of gave me a focus and allowed me to be in touch with people that kind of gave me a focus, gave me direction, but also helped me unlock the potential of where I wanted to be today, yeah.
What are your hopes for the future?
My hopes for the future is that young people like myself see positive and impactful people in the communities as role models, rather than seeing people who may depict a false life, like all this rapping, all this money stuff, which is it's a lie. But I hope to see young people strive for greatness and be more motivated than ever. Especially since lockdown, I can tell it demotivated most of the young people, made them more connected with their social media. I want to see young kids prosper and strive for greatness.
Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today. But as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Goodbye.